great weekend of games this past weekend. I anticipated it. These 1 o'clock games, so many of them came down to either overtime or very late covers. You didn't know who was going to win until the very end. You didn't know who was going to cover. It was a great slate of games. Let's go ahead and get started with the Thursday night game, which was not so great. Another one of these primetime blowout games. But this is a game where the home team was hosting on Thursday night a big underdog in the Minnesota Vikings who was starting a backup quarterback. This is a typical recipe for a disaster in the NFL. It's hard for a bad team to compete on such a short week with a good team because the talent level is so different between these two teams. And when you take a really bad team and give them the added difficulty of playing on such a short week, so you can't really figure out what new schemes you're going to implement or what new wrinkles you're going to implement to try to catch this better team. What are we going to do differently? How are we going to attack the quarterback differently? How are we going to drop some plays offensively differently? You don't have time for that on a Thursday game. So it's much more difficult to accomplish that. However, let's talk about what happened in that game. The Green Bay Packers scored 6 touchdowns. The Minnesota Vikings scored only 1. The Minnesota Vikings, when you look at them being led by Christian Ponder, they only passed for 4.3 yards per attempt. They ran for 4.4 yards per attempt. So they could not pass the ball at all on the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers blitzed the hell out of Christian Ponder. They sacked him 6 times, knocked him off his mark a number of other times. They just ran a very aggressive defensive scheme. They knew this guy was not fully ready for this game and was in the rain on a short week, and they just sent extra rushers at him pretty much the entire first half, forced him to either pass the ball early before the routes were developed, or if he handed the ball off, they were doing snatch blitzes where they just grabbed the running back on the way to the quarterback. If he didn't hand it off, they were just running right at him. Very, very straightforward but aggressive scheme by the defense coordinator, and it ended up working out just perfectly in this game. When you try to look at takeaways for the future for the Minnesota Vikings, it's hard to put a whole lot of stock in this game. As I said, big underdog on the road, short week. You're not going to win those games. It's one of the reasons why I took the Packers in the teaser down. That this is not a game that the Vikings are going to win with that backup quarterback in there. Different story now headed into their next upcoming game. Where they're hosting the Detroit Lions. In this situation, if they're getting Teddy Bridgewater back, you just have to kind of write off a lot of the things that happened last weekend with the Green Bay Packers game, because this Minnesota Vikings team, while not the best team, is better than what they played in that game against the Packers. That game just snowballed and got out of control. On the other hand, look at the Green Bay Packers in terms of their performances. Everybody was questioning this team a couple weeks ago. I took them against the Bears, teased them again against the Vikings. This is a team that's got their offensive rhythm back. When you look at how they were running the ball, ran for 5.6 yards per carry, 156 total rushing yards. They passed the ball extremely well, even though it was raining. Aaron Rodgers completed 68% of his passes, 111 passer rating. That was the 5th best in the NFL. Only threw the ball 22 times. A lot of big splash plays in the pass game, and then they've gotten to the red zone 4 times, converted all 4 into touchdowns. So this is definitely a team whose offense is coming together at the right time, and we know that helps the defense a lot, and this defense isn't superior, so anything the offense can do to stay out on the field and put up production is definitely going to help. Let's jump into the Sunday games, and as my clients know, I send out a cheat sheet every week, a big matrix full of all the stats and information from the games, organized, color-coordinated, so that you can see easily where teams overperformed, underperformed. It's just a free thing that I do for my clients. Just started doing it this year, no extra for that. But anyways, if you're interested in getting a copy, just sign up for the weekly subscription, and you can get yourself a copy. But for the clients, we're going to just move through in order as the sheet has them organized. And the first game is the Denver Broncos versus the Arizona Cardinals, as it turns out, this late game on Sunday afternoon. And as you guys know, I might have mentioned it in the podcast last week, I also told it to my clients that I really like what Bruce Arians is doing with Drew Stanton at quarterback. The reason why I like it is because he's continuing to stay aggressive, just like he would do with Carson Palmer in there. Bruce Arians is having Stanton throw the ball down the field, be aggressive, but I indicated that I think that will end up causing them problems in this game because those are higher risk throws that they would want to make down the field, and that's not how you beat the Denver Broncos. There's a number of teams, like the best teams in this league, that I think there's kind of blueprints to beat these teams. At one point, you thought maybe it was to outscore the Denver Broncos, but kind of like the Dallas Cowboys tried to do a couple of years ago. And that is a higher risk strategy. The easier strategy is simply to maintain time of possession against this team and be efficient. And we've seen the San Diego Chargers actually beat them using this strategy last year. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks, they maintain time of possession too, but they just completely shut down Peyton Manning. And many defenses, most defenses in the league are not going to be able to do that. We saw it in the repeat game against the Denver Broncos earlier this year. They kind of did that. They did shut down the offense to a large extent, but they also maintained time of possession, executed their drives. You remember seeing Russell Wilson go down the field in overtime. It was not anything super aggressive down the field. It was just converting, trying to stay out of third downs, converting first and second downs, but keeping everything high percentage to stay out on the field. We know that Drew Stanton, as I mentioned to you before, is a good downfield thrower in terms of he will hit on some of these deep passes, but he is much less accurate than Carson Palmer. And I told you that last week. Here, this is where it came back to bite them. They initially were hanging with the Denver Broncos because they hit a couple big plays. But over the course of the game, Stanton completed just 35% of his passes. That was the league's worst this entire weekend. That's a terrible number. And so you cannot stay out on the field if you're completing that level of passes. You're just going to be punting. And sure enough, what happened? Arizona punts the ball 11 times, the most out of any team this past weekend. That's another thing you can't do against Peyton Manning. The other problem I indicated with Arizona is that they are not as effective inside of the red zone with Stanton in there. And sure enough, they only went 1 of 2 in the red zone. So that was only 50% conversions. The other problem, they only got down there twice because they were hitting on these big passes or getting nothing and punting the ball. So that's not the recipe to beat the Denver Broncos. And while it looked okay at the beginning, ultimately it didn't play out. If you want to try to hang with the Broncos, you need to control time of possession. We know Peyton Manning had the ball for over 10 more minutes on his side of the field. They went 3 for 3 in the red zone, 2 or 3 on field goal attempts, and they even turned the ball over twice. So you're looking at a Peyton Manning team. Peyton throws 2 interceptions. The Cardinals don't commit any turnovers. So you're down 2 turnovers, and you still win by 21 points. That is a major problem for the Arizona Cardinals. I like the Cardinals. They've only lost 1 game. They've done well for me this season when I've been on them. But the issue for me is you have to know your opponent and the way to attack them and the way to play them. And they did not know the right way to play the Denver Broncos. I think you do have to change your strategy. Look at the way the Kansas City Chiefs almost beat the Denver Broncos earlier this season. They got down to the end zone right there where they were only down by 1 score. They could have got a touchdown at the very end of the game there and sent this thing into overtime. They obviously didn't do that. They covered the spread. But that was a game where everybody said, oh, the Chiefs, there's no way the Chiefs are going to compete with the Broncos in this game. But they figured out how to play. You have to convert third downs. You have to maintain time of possession, keep Peyton Manning off the field, and that's how you can do it. And that's exactly what San Diego's so good at, and that's exactly what Kansas City is so good at when they decide to play the Denver Broncos. Drew Stanton went 19% on third down. They had the league's worst early down success rate. They only had 9 first downs. They got to third down 16 times in their drives, and they only converted 19% of those third downs. So terrible third down conversion rate, terrible early down success rate. That's why they punted the most in the NFL. They had a bad completion percentage. Now, if you think about it, they only completed 12 passes. Those 12 passes went for 178 yards. That's all about 15 yards per completion, which is ridiculous. They had a number of big plays, but that's not the way you're going to beat the Denver Broncos. That might be the way that you could beat a team like the New York Jets, who may not put up very many points, and you just have to hit a few big plays on them. But that's not the way you're going to defeat a Peyton Manning-led Denver Broncos team. Moving down to the next game, let's talk about this New York Jets. They went out to San Diego, watched a few movies out there, and lost to the San Diego Chargers in the process of watching those movies and reviewing those feature films. Geno Smith, a tremendous day out on the field, 1.9 yards per pass attempt. That's correct, 1.9. Worst in the league, 39% completions. He only has Drew Stanton to thank because he would have been dead last in the league, but Drew Stanton only completed 35%. So the Jets went 12 for 31. That's 39%. On those 12 passes, however, he only completed 60 yards were gained on those. So it's certainly a far cry from Drew Stanton throwing 12 passes for 178 yards. Geno Smith, 12 passes for 60 yards. That's how you get your 1.9 yards per pass attempt. That's how you get your 29 passer rating because he also threw 1 interception. The team ran for 4.3 yards per carry, not a horrible number. The interesting thing is, in this game, when you think about it, what have the Chargers, and I've told you this before, what have the Chargers not been able to do this year? Doesn't matter who the running back is. They have not been able to run the ball. They simply could not run the ball. It was constantly 2.1 yards per carry, 2.8 yards per carry, 3.1 yards per carry. They could not do anything against good run defenses, bad run defense. I mean, against the Jaguars, they were terrible last week. What did they do this week? 40 rushes for 162 yards. That's 4.1 yards per carry. Now, we know the little Brandon Oliver character, he really broke out this game, had a number of big runs, and so maybe the Chargers have finally figured out how they're going to get some productivity on the ground. But when you are allowing this team, I mean, the theory was, or the thought going into this game, I think a lot of the sharp groups were on the Jets in this game. I was not. I didn't have anything to do with this game, either on the Chargers or the Jets. But when you look at this game, I think they were hoping that they could shut down the run game and then get after Phillip Rivers. Well, Phillip Rivers has been winning these games for the Chargers because the running game hasn't done anything. He's been passing for 10 yards per attempt, 9 yards per attempt, 7.5 yards per attempt, whatever specific numbers were each week. He was the one getting these wins for the Chargers, along with their defense playing well. In this game here, they not only ran for 162 yards at 4.1 yards per carry, which is the best they've done all season. Phillip Rivers passed for 9.9 yards per attempt. He had 124 passer rating. That was number 1 in the NFL this past weekend. Even though he threw 1 interception, he still had 3 passing touchdowns and 71% completions, 9.9 yards per attempt. That's what gets you to 124 passer rating. So another tremendous game by Phillip Rivers. Look at what these teams did on third down. The Chargers, neither of them were great early down success rate. They attempted a lot of third downs in this game on both sides. That's why they were both 25th or worst in the league this past weekend in early down success rate. However, the Chargers were the number 1 team in third down conversions this weekend, converted 67% of their third down attempts into first downs, and the Jets, on the other hand, only converted 8%. That was 29th in the league. So they went 1 of 12 on third down, which was obviously horrendous. You look at, it's a miracle that they only punted 8 times in this game, but when the Chargers are converting that many first downs, they also went 4 or 5 in the red zone. That is tremendous numbers as well. That adds up to basically your 39-minute time of possession for the Chargers. The Jets had the ball for 21 minutes, and they blew them out 31-0. I mean, this game was 21-0 at halftime, and the lead just increased every quarter from there till the very end of the game. Moving down to the Ravens, traveling out to Indianapolis. This is a game, a pretty interesting game, because I, for one, thought it was going to be higher scoring. But when you look at what the teams actually did in getting to the red zone, they combined had 8 red zone trips on the weekend. There was not a single other game played this weekend that had more trips into the red zone. So these teams were getting down into the red zone. They had scoring opportunities, but combined they went 3 of 8 inside of the red zone. That was only 37.5%. So that's not going to produce enough points. They had the opportunities. They just did not get them in the points. And when I was looking at the Baltimore Ravens, the key to this game I felt was if you can protect Joe Flacco, he'll play well. If you cannot protect Joe Flacco, particularly on the road, he's one of those quarterbacks that's going to struggle. Even though he's the same build like a Ben Roethlisberger, he's not like Ben Roethlisberger. Ben can perform under pressure with guys harassing him constantly. He just deals with it. Joe Flacco, he's not that same type of guy. And so when you look at what they did, I was very surprised and intrigued to notice that the Colts gained 4 sacks on Joe Flacco. When I watched the game, I went back and re-looked at some things on his passes, and one of the reasons why they were getting so many sacks is because they were playing great man coverage, and these Ravens receivers were getting 0 separation. If you're watching these routes develop as Joe Flacco's in the pocket, these guys are completely covered. I don't know if Kubiak wasn't adjusting properly to try to call some different things, or if it was just supreme and superb good defense from the Indianapolis Colts, but there was no separation there, and Joe Flacco did not have many opportunities to get the ball. Now, that's not saying he played well. Otherwise, he only completed 58% of his passes, 5.2 yards per attempt. They actually ran for 6 yards per attempt. So that was the second best rushing yardage per play from any team this past weekend. The only problem was they only ran it 15 times. They only ran it 15 times, even though it was a very close game throughout. In part because he didn't have the ball very much. This was the third biggest time of possession disparity between any two teams this past weekend. The Colts had it for 39 minutes, just like we saw the Chargers have it for 39 minutes. The Ravens only had it for 21 minutes. And I'm not entirely certain why the Ravens got away from their run game. They only ran it 15 times. They passed it 38 times. So they're passing it well over twice as often as they're running it. They're not having success in the pass game. The game's a close game. I mean, it's a 3-point game at halftime. It's a 10-point game at the end of the third quarter, and they obviously only lose by 7 points. So why are you abandoning the run when you're gaining 6 yards per rush on average? Of course, there's some bigger runs, but you still have to develop a run game. So I did not like, just from a fan's perspective watching this game as well as a betting perspective, did not like the way Gary Kubiak called this game, did not like the way Joe Flacco performed and executed that terribly called the game. When you look at the third down conversions for the Ravens, they only converted 9%, 1 of 11 on third down. So that was pretty bad in terms of what they were doing on third down. It wasn't the worst, of course, because we had some really terrible performances around the league offensively on third down this week, but that was certainly right up there as one of the worst performances on third down. Can't get much worse than that, but a couple of teams did. A lot of turnovers in this game, 7 total turnovers. That's why you don't see a ton of punts. There's only 8 punts, even though the Ravens were so terrible on third down, and why you saw so few touchdowns. There's a number of red zone turnovers in this game. So thing to note, this game should have been higher scoring, but for all the inefficiencies inside the red zone and a large number of turnovers. Cowboys versus the Texans, the Battle of Texas. This was a game in which did go to overtime, one of the 2 games this weekend that did go to overtime. The Cowboys ended up winning by 3 points in overtime. It was a close game throughout. The Cowboys had a 10-point lead at the most at one point. The Texans had a 4-point lead at the most. Cowboys led by 3 after the second quarter, after the third quarter, and obviously the game was tied in the fourth quarter. When you look at this game, I think I pretty much have called these teams the last few weeks. And this is a game I felt the Cowboys would win, but I thought the point spread was too high. So I didn't do anything on the game at all, side or total, in any which way. But when you look at this game, a very interesting game because what have I been saying for weeks now about the Houston Texans? I have said, and you guys have heard me, that the Houston Texans are one of the most fraudulent teams in the league due to my early down success rate metrics. This is a team that heading into this game, we're 3-1, and we're one of the worst early down success rate offenses, and we're one of the worst early down success rate defenses. And they have been winning games and achieving in games because when they do get to third down or they force their opponent into third down, they were playing great third down defense or they were converting well on third down offensively. But you cannot rely on that. You cannot be so bad in early down success rate over the course of the game and just convert third downs and expect that's going to continue. Eventually, you have to be much more efficient on the early downs, and that's what they were not doing. Let's look at this game. This is a game, first, let's look at the Texans defense. They allowed the Dallas Cowboys to gain 24 first downs and only go to third down 14 times. So that was a pretty good early down success rate for the Dallas Cowboys offense. When they did get the Cowboys into third down, instead of shutting them down like they have been doing in the past, they actually faced an offense that can convert on third down. They allowed the Cowboys to convert 57% of their third downs. They went 8 of 14 on third down. That was the third best third down conversion that was allowed this weekend. So the Texans, we anticipated them not doing well on early down success rate. They also, this game, did not have that lifeline on third down defense, and they allowed the Dallas Cowboys to continue with the ball and maintain drives. Look at the other side of the field with the Houston Texans on offense, and we were saying their early down success rate stinks. It's one of the worst in the NFL, and sure enough, same exact thing this week. They only had 15 first downs on this game. Dallas had 24. The Cowboys went to third down 13 times to get 15 first downs. That's not good. In fact, it was the third worst early down success rate of any team this past weekend. So they were forced into third downs a lot. And when they got into third downs, they only converted 31% of those. That's about half of what the Cowboys were converting at 57%. So that was one of the worst in the league as well. They're converting only 31% on third down. So as a result, they were punting the ball more. They lost the time of possession battle. The Cowboys were on the field able to play a more efficient offense. And when you look at some of the statistics in general, one of the main things that I have thought and shared with you about the Dallas Cowboys defense is that I think they've been playing well over their heads. They've been using their offense to help mask some of their issues with the defense that I think are still there. They aren't gone from what they were last year. They're just playing a little bit better in certain situations, but that offense is really doing its job, not just time of possession. It's putting that other team in a hole so they have to adjust the strategy they're going to take when they're on offense because they're down and they're not used to being down. So they got to call it in a different way, and that helps the Dallas Cowboys. As any team will tell you who has the lead, it's easier to play defense when you know that other team is probably going to be passing the ball 70%, 60% of the time rather than a very balanced mix. It's easier to call defensive schemes that way. So the Dallas Cowboys had that edge going for them. The one thing in this game that the Texans did well is they ran the ball on the Dallas Cowboys early and often because, in large part, I believe, they were not only seeing success, but they don't trust Ryan Fitzpatrick very much. And so this run game ran 31 times, 176 yards. That's 5.7 yards per carry, third best in the league. And so this is one of the reasons why the Texans were able to stay in this game is via the run game. So Dallas Cowboys defense didn't do a very good job of stopping the run, allowed the Houston Texans to stay in this game. Pretty entertaining game overall. Each quarterback ended up throwing one interception. Both teams got down to the red zone 3 times apiece. So it was an entertaining game from that respect, but certainly no big, splash, exciting, scoreboard lighting up on this one in Texas. But nonetheless, a very close and competitive game, which made it interesting all the way to the end. On the other hand, there was a game that was very splash and exciting on the scoreboard. St. Louis in Philadelphia. This is a game, I was on the Rams, I was on the over in this one, and in this game, there's one thing I want to tell you about the Philadelphia Eagles, not just this game, but the week before. In the last 2 weeks, their offense, the high-powered Chip Kelly, Nick Foles, Darren Sproles, LaShawn McCoy-led offense, has scored a total of 14 points in 2 games. Their defense, special teams, return game have scored a number of points for this team. That offense has only scored 14 points in 2 games. And I mentioned this last week and got some feedback on Twitter. Oh, well, yeah, defense is part of the game. Yeah, it is part of the game. But you're not going to win games counting on getting non-offensive touchdowns. The Eagles had 2 in this game. So they're finding every last way to win games, but it's kind of like what we saw from the Houston Texans in some respects. You can get by a little while with that, but if you can't score points offensively, you are not going to be able to consistently count on getting a bad interception or a fumble return for a touchdown or a blocked punt for a touchdown. It's just not going to happen. And so luckily for the Eagles, it is happening for them now. They're 4-1, doing very well in that division, but they need to clean up a lot on offense. And obviously, Chip Kelly is not saying anything differently than I am saying right now. This offense is struggling a lot. So let's look at some of the numbers from this game. I'm thinking about the St. Louis Rams. This is a St. Louis Rams team that is very different, and I told all my clients this, very different from what we saw last year. Last year, it was a run-based team with a very good defense that could get after your quarterback like hell and sack him over and over and over. This year, I believe they have 1 sack on the whole season. They go into this game in Philadelphia, it's on the road, but they are playing against a battered and beaten up offensive line from the Philadelphia Eagles, a offensive line in complete disrepair. They got Lane Johnson back, one of their guys that were missing, still out 3 of their players. How many sacks do you think the St. Louis Rams team got? This Rams team with this solid defensive line, with draft picks, and everybody was giving them A-plus grades after the draft for picking up these players in the draft and not going after a quarterback, keeping Sam Bradford, but going after these defensive linemen and offensive linemen. They had 0 sacks on this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. That is, that's probably the difference in why they didn't end up winning this game. Don't let the scoreboard confuse you. Obviously they got out to a big lead and the Rams had to come back fervorously at the end. Obviously they were up 27 points at one point, and I certainly thought this Rams bet was out the window. But you look at the way that the offense for the Philadelphia Eagles were scoring their points, and you realize that they were getting a lot of points due to mistakes by the St. Louis Rams, not by their own offense. Let's look at some of those numbers. Nick Foles threw the ball 37 times, only completed 65% of his passes. That sounds good, but it was only 12th best in the league. His 5.6 yards per attempt was 25th in the league out of 30 teams that were playing this weekend. They finally figured out how to run the ball a little bit, but mainly because the St. Louis Rams defense is not very good. So they did average 4.4 yards per carry. They ran 33 times for 145 total yards. So they took some of the pressure off of the offensive line in the pass game, and they just decided to run the ball a little bit more. They could do that and afford to do that with a big lead. They got into the Rams red zone 3 times. They only scored 1 touchdown. So that's another issue there as well. Not a whole lot of red zone attempts because the offense is sputtering out a little bit at times, and they did not have the opportunity to score very many touchdowns in the red zone because they just are not being very effective in that zone of the field. Early down success rate doing only 13th best on the week from that category. So they were decent in third down conversion, 6th best in the league, but this is not a great game from that offense, except at least the positive is they got the run game going a little bit, and they obviously walked away with a victory. From the Rams side of things, the Rams, they did not get after the quarterback whatsoever. But when you look at this game, what I thought ahead of time was Austin Davis. This is Austin Davis's game. This is put the offense on Austin Davis and let him throw the ball around, and that's one of the reasons I like the Rams. And You might have thought I was crazy for thinking that Austin Davis could go, but I've looked at his statistics so far this season. I've looked at his completion percentage, how far down the field he's throwing the ball, his accuracy. So I've had confidence in this Rams team. Now, Austin Davis did not have a good game, but he still completed 7 yards per pass attempt and had 341 total yards. He still had a 101 passer rating. And most importantly, he did not throw an interception, because one interception in this game obviously would have been the nail in the coffin. He did not turn over the ball at all. They had 3 fumbles that they lost, but Austin Davis himself did not throw any interceptions, which was big. He threw 3 passing touchdowns. That's what helped him get his 101 passer rating. So his completion percentage was down. He was throwing the ball a lot more because the team was trailing so much. So it's a difficult he was throwing a lot more high-risk passes, to be certain, in this game than he has in the past. Obviously, that happens when you're losing 27-0. Not 27-0, but you're down by 27 points. So that's certainly a problem. Now, the Rams were able to run the ball. They ran it 23 times for 125 yards. That's 5.4 yards per carry, better than what the Eagles did. So overall, the Rams, they were better passing yards per play, rushing yards per play. They had a better overall total yards per play. And that kept them in this game and allowed them to come back in the end on this bad defense. If they hadn't made some of the mistakes at the beginning, this probably could have been an outright victory for the Rams. So game easily goes over, and the Rams cash on there, +7, barely. The backdoor cover it, but that happens sometimes, especially when you're getting non-offensive touchdowns to the other team. 49ers versus the Chiefs. This is a very, very interesting game. As you can tell, I'm really having a good time talking about these games this week, because I anticipated these games being fascinating ahead of the time when I was on last week's podcast, and they ended up being extremely entertaining and fascinating. A lot to talk about for all these games, so I apologize if this podcast is a little bit longer, but I love sharing this information. I love studying the NFL, breaking games down, trying to anticipate what's going to happen, and then go back and figure out what really did happen in the game. This is a game with the 49ers that I think a lot of people are going to misconstrue. I think a lot of people are leaving and entering into this Monday night game where the 49ers are going to play with the impression that the 49ers defense is back. And I want that to sink in for a little bit. People are going to think that this 49ers defense is back. And that is not the case. That is not the case, because let's look at this. What did the 49ers do to the Eagles last week? Yeah, the Eagles didn't have a great game. Well, guess what? The Eagles did not have a great game again offensively against the Rams. It's not the 49ers defense. And what about the Chiefs this week? Oh, they won. They beat the Chiefs. They held them to 17 points after the Chiefs scored boatloads of points against the New England Patriots last week. Tom Brady gave the Chiefs last week basically 17 points. Threw a pick six, 2 turnovers right near the 10-yard line, as the Chiefs turned into 10 points within a couple of plays each time. So that was 17 points they gave them. That offense played well last week, no doubt about that. But the key to the 49ers this week, they won this game because of their running game offensively. It was not because of Colin Kaepernick. I'll get into that in a minute. And it was not because of their defense. When you look at the Chiefs, you think about what are their limitations. They don't throw the ball down the field. We know that they were missing their number 2 wide receiver. He was out this week, Johnny Avery. So they're missing him. Alex Smith doesn't throw the ball down the field anyways. So what do the Chiefs have? They got Jamal Charles, so he's going to run the ball. What do you do? He ran it for 4.7 yards per carry on 19 rushes. So that's pretty good. 4.7 yards per carry against the 49ers defense. That's not bad. What did Alex Smith do? Well, Alex Smith did Alex Smith things. I mean, without passing weapons, he threw for 5.6 yards per pass. That's 24th in the league out of 30 teams. But guess what? Alex Smith's yards per pass generally is low anyway. He's not a downfield thrower. His 55% completions was definitely on the low end side of things. How much of that relates to him not having his options and his comfort there, it's hard to say. But the Chiefs did get into the 49ers red zone twice. They scored touchdowns both times. And as I said, they were able to run the ball. Their 5.3 yards per play overall was better than what the 49ers yards per play was. The difference in this game was opportunity. The Chiefs, they did convert 55% of their third downs. So they were converting. That was 5th best in the league against this 49ers defense, 55% of their third downs. So they were doing good things there, but the reason I say it was opportunity is because they had the ball for only 23.9 minutes. The San Francisco 49ers had the ball for 36.1 minutes, the 6th largest time differential of the game. And the reason the San Francisco 49ers had the ball for that long is because of their run game. They ran 40 times for 171 yards. It averaged out to 4.3 yards per rush. It was not as good as the Chiefs' 4.9, but they ran it over twice as many times. And so they were eating up the clock and controlling time of possession in this game. Now, they only led by 3 points, the 49ers did, at halftime. They actually trailed entering the 4th quarter. So this was not, by any stretch of the imagination, like a dominant blow-up victory, but they stuck with their run game. One of the reasons they stuck with their run game is because Colin Kaepernick completed just 14 of 27 passes for 52% completions. That was 27th in the league out of 30 teams this past weekend. It's not very good. He was sacked 3 times. I forgot to mention that the 49ers didn't sack Alex Smith at all. So Kaepernick was sacked 3 times. He had a poor completion percentage. He had an 86 passer rating. He led the team with a lot of help from their run game into the Chiefs' red zone 4 times. They only got 1 touchdown out of that. They only went 38% on third down. So this 49ers team was not very good on third down, was not very good in the red zone, was not very good in pass efficiency. Yet they still won this game because, in large part, they controlled time of possession and they got plays when they needed to get plays. But I think it's a bad mistake that people are going to make, and I've heard several smart people already say this, that the 49ers defense is back and that's how they won the game. Keep in mind, this is a 49ers team very familiar with Alex Smith. That's part of the reason why they were able to hold him to 55% completion. But let's not get confused. Kaepernick is still not playing well, and this defense is still not back They're definitely not back to what they were last year, and I don't think they're back to what people think they are at right now. Now, how will that play into this Rams game on Monday night? Very interesting. I'm sure I'll have a lot more analysis on that as we get closer to that game. One thing I can tell you is they do know the Rams very well. So they're very familiar with the Rams, just like they were familiar with Alex Smith. And the Rams defense is much more overrated than I think we all, well, not me. I didn't think they were very, very good last year, especially in the secondary. They were great up front. This year, they're not great up front. They're not great in the secondary. So this Rams defense is not very good overall. But I'll have a lot more on that game coming up later as the week progresses. But very interesting to note, I don't think the 49ers defense is back, and that offense is still struggling where they have in the past inside of the red zone. Let's move down to the Giants versus the Falcons. Very interesting game, back and forth, and this really gets to, and it pains me to say because Mike Smith, I do not like him as a head coach. I do not like him as a decision maker. But they figured out a way to get the ball out of Matt Ryan's hands despite having no offensive linemen in this game. Everybody was beat up. Everybody was injured. Matt Ryan still passed for over 300 yards, and that was the biggest thing that stood out to me in this game. I was very impressed with the fact and didn't expect him to be able to move the ball through the air without any protection there, and for the Giants to get just one sack on him the entire game. Very, very impressed by that fact. This game was basically decided ultimately by red zone production and efficiency. When you look at what the Giants were able to do down there, they got them there 4 times and scored 3 touchdowns. Falcons only got to the Giants red zone 3 times, only scored 1 touchdown. And, of course, the Giants won by 10 points. You look at third down efficiency, this is the biggest statistical variant of this game between the two teams. The Giants converted 60% of their third downs. That was second best in the league this weekend. The Falcons were all the way down to 15%. So that was terrible production from the Falcons. It was great production from the New York Giants. So that's a big, big deal in this game. When you look at some of the other statistics, very similar statistics from the quarterbacks. I mean, very, very similar. The difference is Matt Ryan had more opportunities, more passes that he threw, 45 passes compared to Eli's 30. But when you look at the completion percentage, Eli was 63, Ryan was 64. When you look at the yards per pass, Eli was 6.4. Ryan was 6.8. So both of those numbers very similar in terms of what they did when they had the ball. They just called a different number of pass versus run plays. The Giants were more run heavy. They ran the ball 34 times for 124 yards. Not a very great yards per rush attempt at 3.6. The Falcons only ran the ball 21 times compared to the Giants 34 times. They did have a little bit better efficiency running ball at 4.3 yards per rush. So the Giants' defensive line, I think, is what would stand out to me in this game. Why did they not get pressure on Matt Ryan behind that bad protection? How did they allow him to throw for 300 yards at 6.8 yards per attempt? How did they only get 1 sack on him? And how did they allow this Falcons run game to gain 4.3 yards per carry? The Jaguars versus the Steelers, this game was a very sloppy, messy, ugly game to watch. Ugly game to bet on, as it was very close to the point spread, and it was lower scoring certainly than what I expected, what the books expected as well. When you look at the points scored, the Jaguars scored 11 points less than what the books expected them to score, and the Steelers scored 9.2 points less than what the books expected them to score. So let's look at the primary reason why that occurred was the red zone inefficiency. This was the worst red zone game of any offense combined this weekend. The Steelers went 1 of 4 in the red zone, and the Jaguars went 0 of 2. So combined, these two teams went 1 of 6 in the red zone. So that right there is why your points were so low in this game, this terrible red zone production. I think that speaks more towards the Steelers' offense, to be honest with you, than anything else. The Jaguars, yeah, they're going up against the Steelers' defense, but the Steelers' defense isn't that great. They did only get 2 trips down there. So you would hope they would score a touchdown, maybe at least one of those 2, but nothing to write home about there, but the Steelers not being able to score more than at least 2 touchdowns, possibly upwards of 3 against this Jaguars defense is a cause for concern moving forward. The reason that this game in some ways stayed so close and didn't explode in terms of the points was because no team really pulled away. If you look at the largest lead for either team, the Jaguars at one point had a 3-point lead. They led after the first quarter by 3. The Steelers, their biggest lead was 8. So this game was a 1-score game in its entirety, meaning a touchdown would tie or win the game for any team at any point during the game. Therefore, there was no reason to press, to chase, to do anything differently. When you look at the Steelers' offense against the Jaguars' defense, we know that the Jaguars' defense is bad. Ben Roethlisberger did play a good game overall. He didn't throw any interceptions. He completed 72% of his passes. That was 3rd best in the league in terms of completion percentage. 7.3 yards per attempt. Not letting the world on fire, 13th best, but still decent. And 102 passer rating. So his numbers were pretty decent, but not tremendous. You look at the run game. The run game ran 28 times for 111 yards. That's 4 yards per carry. Again, not tremendous by any stretch of the means. Not terrible, but below average overall on the week. I mean, 4 yards per carry is still okay, but it's not explosive. It's not, the Jaguars are one of the defenses that was allowing a lot of explosive run plays, a lot of explosive pass plays, and the Steelers did not really take advantage of that explosiveness throughout the game. They hit on a couple of big plays, but it wasn't enough, and so that didn't produce any quick touchdowns. It got them a lot of trips into the red zone by having efficiency and consistency from Ben in terms of his completion percentage and his average yards per attempt, but they only went 1 for 4 in the red zone, so obviously they can't do that and expect to score a fair number of points in this game. Neither team tremendous on early down success rate. In fact, both were bottom 8 in the NFL this past weekend in their efficiency on the early down success rate statistic. The Steelers, they go 50% on third down. Jaguars offense, let's talk about Blake Bortles for a moment. Blake Bortles, 0 red zone touchdowns, got into the red zone twice. 5.2 yards per attempt and a 52 pass rating because he did throw 2 interceptions. I'm not so concerned with the pass ratings as I do expect interceptions from the young quarterback. I was a little bit concerned by his completion percentage. He only completed 61% of his passes. That doesn't sound horrible, but it's not very great. And when you're looking at a Steelers defense, I know Dick LeBeau playing a rookie quarterback, whatever. This is not the same Steelers defense. And yeah, he confused them. I don't think Blake Bortles played very well in this game. So I look at him first and foremost when you're looking at his completion percentage, and then his yards per pass attempt. These are things, the passer rating factors in that he did throw 2 interceptions. The pass rating factors in that he did not throw any passing touchdowns. So that's on the side. I'm looking at his completion percentage and his yards per attempt. Neither of those were very good. In fact, his yards per attempt were 5.2. That was 27th in the league out of 30 teams. They could not run the ball very well. They only ran 50 for 56 yards. That right there gives them 4.7 yards per play overall. That was 26th out of 30 teams this past weekend. So if I'm the Steelers, I'm thinking, okay, my defense really shut this young rookie quarterback down. He did not play well. The team could not run the ball, only 56 rushing yards against us. Yet we were in a one-score game with this team, and this is the Jacksonville Jaguars who do not have a win. We just lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week. I think you're looking at a team in the Pittsburgh Steelers that is I don't know if I'll say an outright fraud because their offense can play well. I mean, their offense plays better than the Jacksonville Jaguars most times. But between the defense and the way they're producing offensively, their efficiency, their play calling, all those things wrapped into one, this is a team that is above 500 and probably does not deserve to be there. Not with the way they're playing right now. They've gotten, of course, you could say they got unlucky against Mike Lennon and could have won that game. And obviously they did beat Jacksonville. They didn't do enough to lose this game. So theoretically you could say, oh, well, this could be a 4-1 team. This is a very good team. They're not that good. They are certainly not the caliber of a 4-1 team. And I do not see them being the caliber even of a 3-2 team. This is a game, I think they got lucky against the Jaguars here. So that balances out with the unluckiness against the Buccaneers last week at home. They're going to be in for a very interesting challenge against Cleveland this weekend. That's all I'll say about that. Cleveland's actually a 2-point favorite at home right now. I know Ben has had ridiculous success in Cleveland, against Cleveland. I believe this is just the second time, I want to say since 2001 or something like that the Steelers have actually been a road dog in Cleveland. They were road dogs last year when the team was not very good. The Steelers won outright. It was a pretty dominant victory, and they were road underdogs one other time. It was either in the early 2000s, I believe, or maybe mid 2000s. But I think you can even go back to the late 90s to find the next time. So this is a team that's dominated Cleveland in the past, but it's not the same Steelers team. Very, very interesting game at 1 o'clock next week. You look at the Panthers and the Bears in our next up. Very interesting game here as well. The Bears led this game by 14 points at one point in time. They led after the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, until they finally lost by 7 in the fourth quarter. The only thing I did with this game is I teased the Bears, so that teaser covered the entire way throughout the game and obviously won. But let's first look at the Bears in both phases of this game. Offensively, that's how they've been winning games. Defensively, that's how they've been losing games. Look at this team offensively and what they did against this Carolina Panthers defense, and it really calls into question, again, what is this Carolina Panthers defense? They are not the defense that they were last season. Jay Cutler completed 78% of his passes. That's ridiculous. It's not like he threw 25 passes and completed 20 of them, 21 of them, whatever the exact percentage was. He completed 28 of 36 passes. So he threw almost 40 passes, completed 78%. Obviously, that was tops in the league this past weekend. 7.3 yards per pass attempt. That's okay. That's not great, but it's okay. And they ended up passing for a total of 262 yards. They did not do very good in early down success rate offense. They got into the Panthers red zone 3 times, converted twice. So that's pretty good offensively as well. You look at a couple of big issues for the Bears rather. They committed 10 penalties. That's bad. One of the higher numbers of the week. Compare that to the Panthers who only committed 3 penalties. That's a big discrepancy. Number 2, you give the Carolina Panthers a non-offensive touchdown on that punt early in the game where it got muffed around and then the guy picked it up and ran it back to the end zone. That gave the Panthers a lead. Their biggest lead of the game at 7 points, and so that gave them a non-offensive touchdown. They ultimately win the game by 7 points, so there's your point differential right there on that non-offensive touchdown. The Bears turned the ball over 4 times. Panthers only turned it over 3. So anytime you've got a situation where you're the Bears and you got great numbers offensively, but you give the other team one more turnover, and you're on the road, and that other team has a different opportunity to return a score for a touchdown on a punt, it's going to be very difficult for you to win that game, even if you're completing 78% of your passes, even if you're going 2 or 3 in the red zone. It's going to be difficult for you to win that game. Now, the Bears did not run the ball extremely efficiently, only 3.9 yards per carry, not great. The only good news for them is that the Panthers were even worse, 3.3 yards per carry. So the Panthers' run game was not very good. Cam Newton was not very good. He only completed 19 of 35 passes, 54%. That was 26th out of 30 teams this past weekend. So that was not very good. This team, however, won the game, as I mentioned, having 1 extra turnover, 1 non-offensive touchdown, and they went 3 of 3 in the Bears' red zone. So the Bears' red zone woes continue defensively. The Bears had too many penalties, turned the ball over, and non-offensive touchdown, and that's your ball game. The Lions and the Bills. This is a fun one to talk about, so just bear with me on this one. I mentioned last week on this podcast, as well as some graphics that I tossed up there, about how bad E.J. Manuel was playing, how his completion percentage was so low, despite him having only 34.5% of his passing yardage coming in the air. Most of it was yak. He was not pushing the ball down the field, and his completion percentage was terrible, 58%. Fast forward to what Kyle Orton does in replacement, and he throws 70% completions and 43 pass attempts. 43 pass attempts, 70% completions. Great numbers, 5th best in the league. And this just goes to show you what and how helpful it is to have a quarterback who can at least just execute. That's what the Bills need, just basic execution. Let's also keep in mind, he threw a pick 6 in this game. He threw a pick 6, gave the Lions 7 extra points, and the Bills still won this ball game. It's just very hard to believe some of these statistics, so let's go through them slowly. The Bills ran the ball 22 times offensively and gained just 49 yards. That's 2.2 yards per carry. This is good information because E.J. Manuel, in all of his starts with the Bills, he has never won a game, and let's keep in mind the turnover margin here and the non-offensive touchdown margin here, okay? Let's forget the fact that we gave the Lions 7 points for interception return for touchdown. Forget the fact that we did not win. I'm saying we as in the Bills, did not have the turnover margin edge in this game. We actually lost the turnover margin. The Lions had one more turnover than did the Bills. So keep those things in mind when I tell you these stats. E.J. Manuel has never won a game when his offense ran for less than 4.5 yards per carry. The Bills ran for 2.2 yards per carry in this game. And they threw a pick 6. And they lost a turnover battle. And they still won this game. In the prior games where E.J. Manuel lost, there has only been one time that he did win a game. That was when his team got 2 extra turnovers. They won the turnover battle 2-0. Obviously, we know when you're winning a turnover battle like that, you kind of have to toss those stats out because turnovers decide those games. Here, we didn't win. The Bills did not win the turnover battle, so you can't toss this game out too. They actually lost it. But in those prior games where his teams did not run the ball, he was 0-4. And they scored an average of 11 points and gave up 24 points, and he lost every single game. Now, look at another statistic. Let's talk about the total rushing yards. Again, I don't like discussing total yardage, but let's throw it out there anyways because the number's pretty darn high, so it could be somewhat relevant. When the Bills ran for less than 150 yards, E.J. Manuel has never won a game. There was one game with a non-offensive touchdown that they ended up scoring that they did win, but again, that's a unique situation you kind of have to toss out when you're getting crushing the turnover margin. That's going to decide games. When you have all these non-offensive touchdowns, that's going to decide games. In this situation, they had no non-offensive touchdowns here. They had no return touchdowns, and the other team actually had one. They still won this game. Previously, he was 0-5, E.J. Manuel was, in games when his team ran for less than 150 yards, and they didn't get a non-offensive touchdown. So the fact that they gave the other team 7 points, they lost the turnover battle, and only ran for 49 yards at 2.2 yards per carry, to me is mind-boggling that they were able to win this game. It was not just Kyle Orton. Let's get that perfectly straight. Yes, he threw 70% completion. Yes, he led that team at the end. It was this defense in large part. It was what this defense was able to do to Matt Stafford and the Detroit Lions. Yes, the Detroit Lions did not have Calvin Johnson. He got injured. It wasn't even 100% to come in with. Yes, Reggie Bush went out of the game as well. Those things all certainly played a factor as well. But going into this game, I took the under. It ended up winning. We knew that the Lions offense, the Lions had a good defense and a pretty good offense overall, but the strength of the Bills was their defense. And all they needed was somewhat of a competent quarterback to not turn the ball all over the place and actually complete passes. The main thing was completing passes and being somewhat efficient. Orton still had a huge mistake throwing the pick 6, but was able to stay grounded, complete 70% of his passes. So let's look at the defense now. What did the defense do? Because we know the run game was non-existent. Orton throws a pick 6, but he completes 70% of his passes. This defense held the Lions to only 13 first downs. That was the third worst in the league this weekend. 1 of 11 on third down. That was the 9% conversions on third down. Again, one of the worst of the weekend. They held the Lions to only 3.5 yards per carry, 69 total rushing yards, only 4.6 yards per play, which was 27th in the league. The Bills were better than that. So it was a very good, I can't imagine the feeling in that locker room. This is a solid team victory all the way around. Yeah, the running game didn't really contribute all that much, but guess what? The quarterback, the receivers, and the defense, they got this job done for the Bills. Kudos and hats off to them. I'm glad it ended up working out for the head coach that his replacement quarterback did end up playing well. And keep in mind, he did not play great. His overall pass rating was just 87. He did not throw for 300 yards. He did not need to. They don't need that quarterback to do those types of things. They don't need a guy to come in and be Peyton Manning on this team right now. They just need somebody to be better than E.J. Manuel. E.J. Manuel was so bad. They just need somebody to be a little bit more efficient. Orton wasn't efficient by a lot, because of that pick 6. The pass rating wasn't ridiculous, but 70% completions on 43 passes was way better than anything E.J. Manuel was doing for this team. Jump ahead to the highly bet game of the day, which was the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to visit the New England Patriots. Heading into this game, the key was, of course, we talked about this before time and time again, the New England Patriots offense, not very good on early down success rate. One of the worst offenses in the league. They could not get it going on first and second down, and on third down, they were mediocre, so they needed to be more efficient on first and second downs. Right out of the gate, we saw them being very efficient. They converted third downs. They were getting chunk plays in the pass game. We're not talking like 70-yard bombs. We're not talking about 60-yard bombs. We're talking about 9-yard passes, 12-yard passes. Still manageable passes where Brady's going to get some type of protection. They played very well, though, and that helped get this defense a little bit off balance, so they couldn't tee off on Tom Brady. Overall, Brady completed 66% of his passes, 8.1 yards per attempt, had a 110 passer rating, was only sacked one time. Very, very good, improved performance, and he got a lot of support from this run game that ran a total of 46 times for 220 yards. Just carved up this Cincinnati Bengals defense. That's the weakness of the Bengals, is their run defense. That was exposed. They're obviously without Linus Burfict. That with a problem. But this run defense is one of the least efficient in the entire league this season so far, is the Bengals run defense, and that played right into the New England Patriots' hand in this game. Now, an interesting fact about this game, I'll go ahead and mention the Cincinnati Bengals stats first. First of all, Andy Dalton, 8.3 yards per attempt, pretty good. He did most of that in the second half when the game was out of control, though. To start the game, he was not very efficient, was not very good on third down. Of course, look at what they did on third down. League's worst team. They only had 7 third down attempts, converted none of the 7, 0%. Obviously, that you can't do any worse than that. So they were the worst team in third down conversions, and they only got the third down 7 times, though. So they were the second best early down success rate team. That's how they actually ended up getting 17 points on the scoreboard, is because they bypassed third down a fair amount. They had 17 first downs. Not a lot, because the New England Patriots were controlling the clock. Because of that run game and because of a dominant pass game, they were able to control the clock and control the tempo. They held the ball for almost 39 minutes. That was the number one largest time disparity between two teams this entire weekend. So the Patriots dominated that aspect of the game. Now, the interesting angle of this game was I liked the under in this game. And when the first half went under the total, I instructed all of my clients, go ahead and bet the over in the second half. And I tweeted it out, too, to give everybody a shot at betting the over in the second half. Threw some statistics out there, and you're going to have to dig back through my timeline to favorite that tweet. When there is a team who has a big margin at halftime, they scored a number of points, they're up by at least 14 points, these games go over all the time. And so when you were fortunate enough that the first half line did go under the total, I think the first half saw 23 points scored. The line was 23.5. So everybody who bet first half under walked away with a winner. But the game obviously went way over the full game line, and we bet over in the second half, and it got there with ease. I believe there was 3 touchdowns scored within the first 8 minutes of the third quarter. And with 4 minutes left in the third quarter, this game was already over. The second half number and the full game number. So that was one of the easiest plays that we had this week and one of the easiest winners. You didn't have to sweat on that one whatsoever. So keep that in mind moving forward. Dig through my timeline, find that tweet, favorite it, whatever you need to do. But it's very helpful, and it's hit 85% this season out of like 15 opportunities. And historically, going back 25 years, even in like the non-pass heavy era, even in any era, it's hit, I believe, 65, 66%. So giving that information out for free, definitely something you're going to want to file away and look to anytime you get a chance to. Buccaneers at the Saints, what a great, interesting, exciting game. Even though this was the worst game of the weekend in terms of the records heading into this game, I predicted it was going to be a very entertaining game, something to keep your eyes open for, and that did not let anybody down. I was writing about that in my article that comes out every Saturday night called Inside the Isolator, which is, again, free. If you go to my website, you can subscribe to the mailing list. I send that out every single Saturday evening, just after midnight, and it's a fascinating read, either if you're up late or you're up for a little while on the West Coast. You're going to get that earlier than everybody who's asleep on the East Coast, of course, but if you get up early in the morning, drink your coffee and take a look at it. A lot of interesting information, analytics to look at for the upcoming games on Sunday. That said, this game, the New Orleans Saints offense, it's fascinating because Drew Brees, he is still playing well, but he threw 3 interceptions. So when you look at their stats, the most first downs, obviously the game went to overtime, so keep that in mind too, right? But the 34 first downs compared to just 20 for the Buccaneers. He had the best early down success rate. They only went to third down 13 times, and they gained 34 first downs. So that was the best early down success rate of any team this past weekend. They were very strong running the ball, 4.8 yards per carry, ran for 140 total yards. Not just themselves on their offense, but then their defense shut down the Bucs, held them with just 3.1 yards per carry, which is 27th in the league. And the Saints only punted it twice. So that's why they had 31 points at the end of the fourth quarter. Their offense is playing efficiently. They did get into the red zone of the Bucs 5 times, scored 3 touchdowns. So that could be a little bit better, but still pretty good numbers overall, about 50%, certainly 60% at home. You might expect them to be even better than that, especially against this Bucs defense. I probably would have, but the key here, obviously, there's 3 interceptions. And so when you look at the turnover margin, they lost the turnover battle, not just by 2 turnovers, but they also gave up a non-offensive return touchdown to the Bucs. So you're down 2 turnovers. You give the other team a free 7 points on the board due to a return. That's a big hole to climb out of. And fortunately, the Saints have the offense that they can climb out of such a hole, but they didn't make it easy on themselves, that's for sure. And the Bucs obviously were the right side in this game, and they ended up covering. So even though it went to overtime, unlike, let's say, anybody who's backing Broncos a couple weeks ago, they were probably not the right side of that game, but they almost did get the cover in overtime. But for the Seahawks scoring that touchdown at the end, because we have these new rules, touchdowns win the game in overtime on the first drive. In this case, the Saints did score a touchdown in overtime, but the Bucs obviously were catching a lot more than 6 points. So didn't make a difference in the cover for this game. When you look at the Saints defense, this is still the problem. When you look at what they did, they allowed Mike Lennon to pass for 7.8 yards per attempt. That was 6th best in the league. He had no run game to depend on. They only ran 66 yards, rushing 3.1 yards per carry, as I mentioned earlier. When you look at what this team did, yeah, they only had 20 first downs, but they were the 4th best early on success rate team. They only went to third down 9 times, so that was very strong against this defense. They were able to convert things because this defense is just not very good. They got into the red zone only 2 times. They converted both touchdowns. They scored a couple touchdowns from further out in the red zone. So that's what kept this game close. Ultimately, if you're the Bucs, you need to figure out a way to generate some running yards, and you need to figure out a way to generate some pressure on the opposing quarterback. They did not have a single sack. They just happened to be the right place, right time, got a couple of 3 interceptions, and made that pay on the scoreboard and got them the cover, and their offense played well enough in the pass game. Nothing lights out. I mean, they did only average 7.8 yards per attempt, which was 6th best, so that's not bad, but 92 passer rating, that's 15th in the league out of 30 teams, so right there, middle of the pack with that. Completion percentage needs some improvement, only 19 of 32, 59% completions, that was 19th in the league. But this is a toss-up game there at the end. Obviously, it ended up going to overtime. So, entertaining game, a good game to watch. A game the Saints got a much-needed win at home, and it certainly was a lot closer than the line makers anticipated it being, and for good reason, because the Saints defense is terrible, and turnovers certainly helped the Buccaneers. Jumping to the Titans and the Browns. What another exciting game all the way until the very end. That's why these 1 o'clock games were just ridiculous on Sunday. I loved watching them as a fan, and when you're making money betting them too, it's a lot of fun seeing these outcomes go the way that you need them to. But this is a game, a lot of offense in this game, and I want to say the tale of 2 different quarterbacks because of the injury that occurred to starting quarterback for Tennessee Titans. But when you look at what Whitehurst did when he came into the game, he actually threw the ball pretty well, scored a couple of touchdowns right there off the bat. You thought this game might be over, but he actually jumped this lead out to its biggest. I mean, the Titans were actually up by 25 points in this game. The real problem for the Titans came at the end of the game where they got so conservative offensively. But defensively, this Titans team just got destroyed by the Browns offense, particularly in the second half. The Browns just got everything rolling, got everything in sync, and just ripped their hearts out down in Tennessee. They ran for 4.9 yards per carry on the day. They passed for 7.7 yards per carry. Obviously, the Titans were better in both categories. The Browns actually had 1 turnover in the game, so they did not win the turnover battle. What they were great at is early down success rate. They were the 3rd best team on early down success rate, and that was pretty much it. They got to the red zone 4 times, converted 3 into touchdowns. Titans likewise had 3 red zone touchdowns, but they only got down there 3 times, so they were 100% efficient in that. Titans were better on 3rd down conversions. Like I said, Titans were better in yards per play, but not by a huge amount. This was just a very entertaining game back and forth that the Browns finally got their act together, finally got things into gear, and ended up pulling out the outright victory. Certainly a very big surprise, and now they come home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who also pulled out the victory down in Jacksonville. And that should be a very entertaining game, I do believe, this Sunday at 1 o'clock. The last game of the weekend is the game that I probably have the most to talk about because this is the Redskins and Seahawks on Monday Night Football. I had a lot of information on this game to share with clients that wrote a long write-up, analytical analysis about what I thought was going to happen in this game, how I thought it was going to break down. Did not quite see enough value on betting the over, and so I was hoping to find a better number at halftime. We didn't find it there, so you can go to my blog, which I encourage you to do. You'll see my whole write-up. I went ahead and posted it there around like the second quarter of the game last night for anybody who wanted to see it, to check it out. I sent it to my clients earlier that day on Monday. But the main thing here I think is a couple-fold. Number one, just because you think a game might go a certain way doesn't mean you have to place a bet. I just didn't see enough value there to place that bet. I wanted to do something at halftime, but again, didn't see the line that I wanted. So you could say, well, all this work, all this effort to come up with this analysis, which took hours. I called some guys with the Redskins and talked to them and got some information and put it all into this write-up that I did, and ended up having nothing on the game. The only thing we had on the game was a laid-over teaser. We needed the Seahawks to just win the game to close out a teaser. We finished 60% on the week in NFL, and they obviously did that. But we didn't initiate any new plays on Monday. So that was a lot of work and a lot of effort that just went wasted, you could say. But I don't view it as being wasted. Number one, I learned some things in my research. Number two, I was able to share that and impart that with a lot of my clients before the game. They had a good idea of what I thought was going to happen prior to the game. And then, you guys who are listening to this podcast, you can go back and read it and check out what I thought. But the other thing to learn from is that you don't always have to place a bet on the game. Yeah, it is a Monday night game. Yeah, I had a lot of research done, but I didn't see the value. It ultimately ended up being 44 points scored. The total was at 45. You could get maybe 45.5. The in-game number on the second half line came out to make it 46.5. Bet up a little bit to 47, and so there just was not. I didn't see the value there, and so we didn't do anything. And of course, the first half of the game did go over the first half number. The first half number was 23. 24 points were scored in that first half. There might have been 23.5 available. I'm not sure, but at either rate, first half went over. Second half went under. Full game went under by 1 point. So very close to the total. But in that write-up, the main thing I said for the Redskins, there's, like I was talking about earlier, the recipe to beat the Denver Broncos. You have to play them in this manner, unless you've got like this ridiculous defense like the Seattle Seahawks. The recipe to beat Seattle, in my opinion, based on my research and what I've looked at, and I'll share some of that with you on this, and you can read my article too, you have to go after Richard Sherman. You have to get big chunk plays in the passing game. The reason you have to do that is because Seattle Seahawks, on average, when they've lost games, they've only lost 10 games since 2012. In those games, they're forcing teams to drive 75 yards for every touchdown they score. That's the most in the NFL, meaning you're getting bad field position. And you not only have to take that bad field position 75 yards, you have to do it against the best defense in the league. How are you going to be able to convert 4 third downs on a scoring drive against this team? You're lucky if you can convert 2 third downs to drive 75 yards. You'll be lucky if you can do that against this defense. If you're trying to convert multiple third downs, that you might get 1, you might get 2. You're probably not getting 3. And that's just the way this defense is. They are so good. The way to beat this team is not like the way to beat the Denver Broncos. You don't just dink and dunk and convert third downs and use time of possession and keep Russell Wilson on the bench and have your defense execute. That's not how you beat them. And people might say, oh, well, what about San Diego? Didn't they beat them like that? No, they did not. Look back at that box score. Look at the play-by-play for the way the San Diego Chargers beat this team earlier this year. And look at the scoring drives. When San Diego scored their points, they scored their points on long drives up the field that were a lot of yards, but they got them in chunk plays very quickly. 10-yard pass, 20-yard pass, 8-yard run. It was a lot of chunk plays that got down the field, and then they scored the touchdown. They did pretty well on third down conversions overall. But that wasn't what they were doing when they were scoring their touchdowns, actually. That was to keep Seattle on the bench after they already had their points on the board. You need to run the ball and eat up clock and all those types of things once you have the damage done on the scoreboard. But that's not going to get you points, and that did not get San Diego points in that game either. Check out the play-by-play on how San Diego was scoring their points in that game. You're going to score points through chunk yards. So my strategy and my outlook for this game is to get Deshaun Jackson on Richard Sherman's side of the field. Have him line up over there and go downfield, either on a go route. I know Richard Sherman's pretty good at defending the sideline, or just have some type of a simple double move, anything to make Richard Sherman get out of his stance one way, split his hips, any type of thing to slow him down just a second. And Deshaun Jackson has that speed to get past him at that point in time. That's the key. If you throw a couple of those and you hit one of them, that is going to change when you start doing it, try it another time. That's going to change the rotation of that secondary just a little bit. Put them in a situation that they're not perfectly comfortable being in. And when you do that, that opens up other things for your offense in underneath routes. Because the biggest thing for Seattle Seahawks are so used to putting Richard Sherman over there, rolling the safety coverage to the other side of the field, and not having to worry about it. And when Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers decided we're not throwing at Richard Sherman, it was just a death wish. Trying to keep this defense, allowing all their defenders to worry about one side of the field. Are you kidding me? This defense can cover the entire field. You have only worried about half the field. They're going to destroy you. That's what happened against Green Bay earlier this season. Finally, I have no idea what in the world Jay Gruden was doing. Earlier in the game, he's running, short passes, doing everything the exact wrong way. Finally, he waits until the Redskins are down 17-0, and there's only 2 minutes and 43 seconds left in the first half. He decides to go ahead and put Deshaun Jackson over there on Richard Sherman's side and send him down the field and throws him a long pass. Guess what? It puts up 7 points on the board, just like that. That touchdown drive was a 4-play drive. They, I think, passed the ball 3 of the 4 times. They gained 2 first downs, did not go to third down at all on those 4 plays, and scored a touchdown. It was an 80-yard drive. Just like that, boom, 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 touchdown. And that is the way that you need to beat Seattle Seahawks. And I have no idea why they waited that long to put Deshaun Jackson over there on Richard Sherman's side. Now, I know Cam Chancellor was rolling over to Sherman and blah, blah, blah. The point is that that's the side of the field you have to attack, because that's the side of the field that is the least comfortable if you're able to expose for the Seattle Seahawks, because that's the side they're the most comfortable letting Richard Sherman take care of. And when you can get plays on that side of the field, because we know they don't roll their defenders on the other side of the field, that's Richard Sherman's side. They're used to having to worry about the other side and letting Richard take care of this side. That's where you got to attack to expose some chinks in this armor. Redskins ended up making this a pretty close game. It was only a 7-point game after the third quarter, after being a 10-point game at halftime. But the fact of the matter is the Redskins, they ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. If you look at those 2 drives, take a look at these statistics. The 2 scoring drives for the Redskins where they got touchdowns. A total of 15 plays on those 2 drives. 12 passes and 3 runs. A total of 160 yards. Each of them were 80-yard plays, 80-yard drives. 140 of those were passing yards. Only 20 of those were rushing yards. They only needed 7 first downs to get 160 yards. So that tells you that they're getting chunk plays, only 7 first downs and only 15 plays to gain 160 yards. And they only went to third down 1 time in those 2 drives. The rest of the game, I have no idea what Jay Gruden was doing. He calls 41 other plays, 24 are pass, 17 are rush. The 17 rush plays gained a total of 12 rushing yards. The 24 pass plays gained a total of 140 passing yards. They go to third down 11 times. They only get 7 first downs. I mean, in this game, they had a total of 14 first downs. 1 of the 14 came when they ran the ball for a first down. The other 12 were by pass and 1 was by penalty. It seems very obvious, and it should have been to them looking at tape or anything, because I figured it out just in a few hours this Monday afternoon, the exact way to expose this team and what they need to do. And not every team has a Deshaun Jackson, who's not only fast but capable of catching those types of balls. And the Redskins had him, and they didn't use him enough in the right routes. And it's a shame. I mean, of course, people ask, oh, you have the Redskins, or are you just being sore on Twitter? No, I did not have the Redskins. I wanted the Seattle Seahawks to win. But I'm a fan of the game. I'm a fan of the analytics. I'm a fan of efficiency. I hate watching inefficient football. I hate watching bad play calling. And these are things I research a lot and study a lot, and I like talking about them. I like sharing them. That's why you're listening to this podcast right now, because you think that some of my information is somewhat valuable. And so I enjoy researching it and sharing it with you guys, and I'll do it on Twitter and everything else like that, and I'll call out bad plays no matter what they are. And that's aside. I mean, that's why I wrote my entire analytical preview to start this football season. I just have a passion for this stuff and like sharing that information. So at any rate, that was the most frustrating game of the entire weekend for me, because I think there was a blueprint there, and it was not exposed. And ultimately, I went 1-0 on the recommendations I gave on that game, but that's besides the point to me. So, next opponent, they're looking at the Dallas Cowboys. And what are they going to do with the Dallas Cowboys? Well, we'll talk about that in our segment when we look ahead to the games this upcoming weekend. But there certainly are some matchups that Dallas could take advantage of if they so desire to. But it'll be interesting to see that game play out for sure. Let's run through some of these injuries now. Arizona Cardinals lost their punter with a groin injury. He's out for the season, Dave Zastabil. They also have Matt Shaughnessy, linebacker. He hurt his knee. Looking at maybe a Week 14 return, so he's going to be out for a while. Patrick Peterson messed up his ankle. He's currently listed as day-to-day. We know that their quarterback, Drew Stanton, went out with concussion, so was he going to be back? What's the status of Carson Palmer? Are they going to have to turn to Logan Makins? So a lot of questions at quarterback position, which is why this game's off the board pretty much everywhere. Calais Campbell, he hurt his knee, looking like he's out 3 to 4 weeks, along with defensive line. So a lot of injuries for the Arizona Cardinals off of their game in Denver this past weekend. Baltimore Ravens, Chris Canty hurt his wrist. He's out indefinitely, so he's a defensive lineman for them. The Buffalo Bills, when is Kyle Williams going to be back from his knee injury? He missed last week's game. That's a big cog there for the middle of that line, so that's important for them to have Kyle Williams back. And Fred Jackson, he is dealing with an ankle injury, so we'll see how he's going to look heading into this upcoming game. Jumping to the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears obviously are dealing with Jerome Bushrod, their tackle, who was out for the last game. When's he coming back from his knee injury? He's week to week. John Bostic, their linebacker, he hurt his back. And Chris Conte dealing with concussion. So they got some injuries there to a couple of key defensive players, and the tackle trying to figure out when he's going to come back. Cincinnati Bengals, you're looking at their biggest injury, I think, is Vontaze Burfict. And when is he coming back from his concussion? He missed this past week's game, was listed as doubtful and missed it. So getting him back certainly would help that run defense a lot at linebacker. Marvin Jones, the dynamic wide receiver for them, when's he coming back? And Sean Porter, the linebacker, he is out for the season with a knee injury. He's put on the IR. Cleveland Browns, Phil Taylor dealing with a knee injury. So when is he going to be available? When you look at the Dallas Cowboys, Rolando McClain, their linebacker, he's listed as day-to-day right now with a groin injury. Denver Broncos, Monte Ball, we know that he hurt his groin as well. Looking at maybe a return Week 8, so they're going to have to get by a few weeks without him, juggling some guys along the running back position. Detroit Lions, 3 key skill position player injuries. Calvin Johnson, he has been gimpy. It's been used as a decoy. Not really sure what the purpose of that was. He got hurt again, hurt that ankle a little bit more this week. I think Caldwell definitely needs to sit him down for a week or two. No point in, I know they lost the game, but if he's going to be a decoy anyways, he's just getting hurt without really helping your team because everybody knows he's just being a decoy right now. Reggie Bush, though, did hurt his ankle, and so how much time is he going to miss? Joique Bell, their other running back, is still dealing with concussion injury, so he's listed as day-to-day. Jumping to the Miami Dolphins, Mike Pouncey, looking to see if he's going to be able to come back from a hip injury. He hasn't played when their last weekend either, when they were out in London versus the Raiders, so coming off of a bye. They're hoping to get him back into the mix. Minnesota Vikings, of course, looking at Teddy Bridgewater's ankle. He probably would have played last week had the game been on Sunday. It was on Thursday, short week. He's looking to return Week 6. He's looking to return this week. It looks like he's going to play this week, so we'll have to see how he practices. Jimmy Graham hurt his shoulder. I think right now he's the guy that's just looking to target a return Week 7, so we'll have to see on his status. Might miss this week's games, but Jarius Byrd, he's missing the rest of the season. They signed him to a free agency, the biggest acquisition, safety, and he's put on the IR, got knee surgery done. The New York Giants, Rashad Jennings, hurt his knee. He's listed this week to week. Oakland Raiders, linebacker Kaluka Mavea, he is out for the season with a hamstring, put on the IR. Philadelphia Eagles, when are they getting back their best linebacker, Michael Kendricks? I'm not sure. He's missed a couple of games. He's listed as day-to-day right now. San Diego Chargers. We're going to talk about a couple teams here dealing with injuries to their center, except for San Diego has lost not just this center, Doug Legursky has been put on the IR, but their starter, Nick Harvick, he was put on the IR earlier, so they had to turn to a backup, Rich Orenberger. He's been inactive the last couple of weeks due to a back injury, so their third guy brought in, it was Doug Legursky. He's now out for the season. They just signed a guy off of Cincinnati Bengals, so this is a team dealing with their fourth string center. And how well is he going to work with Phillip Rivers? We know that the center position is a highly underrated position along that offensive line for a team that's already struggling to run the ball. Will be interesting. They're also dealing with Donald Brown, who suffered a concussion, and Malcolm Floyd is dealing with a calf injury, their wide receiver. The Seattle Seahawks off their Monday night game, they're dealing with the injury to the center, Max Unger. He left the game. We'll have to see what his status is. Tennessee Titans lost their star DB, Bernard Pollard, to an Achilles injury. He is out for the season, but placed on the IR. And the Redskins, is pretty early to tell what their injury status is going to be, but Brian Orakpo left that game with an ankle injury and came back, played a little bit. The number of other guys that are dealing with banged-up injuries. Ryan Clark got injured. He missed a few plays. So we'll have to see what some of these guys' status is a little bit later this week. So the Week 6 Rearviewmirror podcast is now in the books. We went through everything on a much more extended deep dive basis. These future podcasts I know are not going to take as long, but if you made it during your listening to me now, my hope is that you learned something, you think that is worthwhile, it's helped you understand the game a little bit better, maybe you learned a few things that you didn't know beforehand, and will help you in the future weeks looking at the NFL season. When we look ahead one last time to this week 6 slate of games, obviously I already touched on a few of the games previously, a lot of good divisional games this week, and then a couple of pretty interesting and intriguing non-divisional matchups. So let's touch on a few of these games real quick. Thursday night game, of course, a pretty good divisional battle. This is for first place in the AFC South. The surprising Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. That's going to be a good game down in Houston. I'm looking forward to seeing what both teams bring to the table after disappointing performances, I think, from each last week. The Colts won, but didn't look great. The Texans lost. Looked decent, though, in that loss, so should be a pretty interesting game. When you look at the 1 o'clock slate, you have to see the Jets again. They're taking on Peyton Manning this week. What's going to happen to this New York Jets offense? They scored no points last week on the road. They come back home. That was probably the most expensive trip to have somebody go watch a movie that anybody's made in the United States. But Geno Smith, kudos to you. You got to see the movie, and your stats definitely showed that you cared more about the movie than the game. How are you doing in front of the home crowd? At some point, this crowd's going to be turning on him. Not that Vic is playing any better or would play any better, but come on, buddy. You got to think, use your brain a little bit here. Divisional battle, Pittsburgh versus Cleveland. I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be one of the more underrated matchups of the entire weekend. Definitely exciting to see if this young Cleveland Browns team can take over that division from the Pittsburgh Steelers, because Ben has routinely defeated the Browns, and I think it's going to be a great game. Another divisional game that should be great at 1 o'clock is Detroit versus Minnesota. We know both teams are dealing with injuries, but this game is going to be pivotal for that division. I think the future of both teams in terms of being able to compete with the Green Bay Packers in that division is really on the line this week. You've got the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Again, another tremendous divisional battle. Both teams are 3-2. I'm really excited to see that game unfold. I think it's going to be tremendous game there. A couple of non-divisional games that I think are awesome are going to be very exciting to break down and analyze, preview, as well as watch. Green Bay at Miami. You've got a lot of connections there between Joe Philbin and the Green Bay Packers. Miami's off their London trip, so that's going to be a fascinating game to break down and enjoy. And then the Carolina Panthers traveling to Cincinnati. Both teams have 3 wins. Both teams have a winning record, and Carolina got a huge win they really needed last weekend against the Bears. Cincinnati off a big loss up in New England. So that's going to be a great game to watch, I think, as well. Pretty intrigued to watch that game. You look at the 4 o'clock slate, a couple of snoozers, I think, the San Diego-Oakland game, the Washington-Arizona game. Obviously keep an eye on them because there's only 4 games at 1 o'clock. But the 2 focal point games, certainly you got 2 games with teams that each only have 1 loss. Dallas versus Seattle. Fascinating game to break down. Seattle on the short week. Dallas playing well, in a good groove, going out and playing in a very difficult place to play. I'll always remember the Tony Romo Butterfingers snap on that extra point, I believe it was, in the game up in Seattle. So that's going to be a fun game to watch him go back up there. And then Chicago versus Atlanta. These 2 teams both have 3 losses, so both have a losing record. Both lost games last weekend. Both of those teams actually had the lead in those games and went on to lose them. So they've got to come back. Atlanta's played 2 games on the road, finally gets to come back into their dome. The Chicago Bears got to get a win as well to try to maintain pace with the rest of that teams in that very competitive NFC North. So that's going to be fun. And then close out the weekend with the Sunday night and the Monday night game, 2 divisional battles. New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, anything with the Eagles right now, dealing with their offensive line and how lackluster their offense has been, is must-see TV to figure out what Chip Kelly tries to do with that offense. And then you've got the San Francisco-St. Louis game. Definitely think that there's going to be some exciting angles to introduce and break down on that game as we move forward. So I said I was really excited about last week's games. They ended up being very competitive. I'm really excited about this week's games too. I think I see a few stinkers on the card that aren't going to be much interest, but there's a lot more divisional games, a lot more at stake this week in terms of either 2 teams that are struggling and got to get something done, so they both need wins, or 2 teams that are on rolls playing one another. I think there's a number of those situations that are factored in terms of this weekend's games. So and then you got the divisional games where you've got like mediocre teams in some cases, or above average teams who just really got to get a win, can't afford to lose to their opponent this early in the season. So definitely excited to see this week's games. Excited to break them down for you. Excited to put up some games earlier in the week and start hitting and firing on some of these. So look forward to my write-ups. Look forward to some of the information I'm going to give you this week, and certainly looking forward to these games this weekend.
This is going to be a fun ride. This is going to be a fun ride. Everybody want to clap. I'm going to play when I want to play, do what I want to do. I'm going to say what I want to say. Did I say anything stupid today? Tomorrow is to take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. Take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. If I can't get to it, nobody can get to it. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie. Everybody one clap, one clap.